The very first thing that's required before taking on a new project is to find a source of inspiration. Here's a photo that I dug up from the internet of a 3-track signal bridge, and here's a similar 2-track version that looks remarkably similar to the NJ International 2-track signal bridge. So if we're doing a double-track bridge, we need signals for 2 tracks. I have selected NJ International again for their signal masts with targets, 2 of them. They come in black or silver, just as the bridge does. I probably should have got these in silver and just touched up the targets in black, but it's easy enough to repaint the mast silver just before I install them. To power up the targets, we'll need to extend those wires that come with them. As you can see, these are fairly short wires, so we'll need some 30 gauge wire, red, green, and black, to match up the colors that come with it. And to extend the mast, you've got some tubing. You can get plastic or brass. I chose to get the brass one. This is 3/32 of an inch. It is hollow. I haven't decided whether I'm going to run the wires down through the mast or behind them. In the photos you can see it done either way. And we also need some scale lumber, because there's a walkway in the bridge for service folks to maintain the signals. When I first started out researching this project, I thought, well, maybe I'm going to go with a metal walkway. There is a metal walkway that you can get. This is also from NJ International, but I felt after looking at it that it gave the bridge too modern a feeling, and I wanted it to look a little older or dated, so I felt it was best to go with the scale lumber. You'll see this is 1 inch by 8 inch. I was actually looking for 2 by 8s, couldn't find them. You can double up these, or do as I've done, and I'll show you in a sec here, is create a template out of cardboard, and that basically gives it a much thicker appearance. The bridge kit is very straightforward, easy to put together. Basically 4 sprues. You've got 2 sides, a top and a bottom, and the 2 supporting legs. On this sprue you also have the footings and some smaller bits of sheet metal to top it off, plus a ladder to go up one or both sides of the bridge. When the bridge is finished, it looks like this. So a fairly realistic representation of a 2-track steel truss bridge. Now, before you go and assemble your bridges, the first thing that has to be done is you need to make a template of the bottom level of the bridge. That's this one here, because this is where the wooden walkway is going to sit. So this is a very simple template, just made from rough measurements and then trimming the corners, all 4 corners, so that they'll fit around the vertical posts. When that's done, voila, we take our strip wood, cut it down to size, and glue it to the template, and give it a good staining with whatever flavor you like. I used Woodland Scenic's Burnt Umber, a few coats, but before I did that, you'll see little scribe marks. I measured off a scale 4 feet, alternating every other timber to give it a pattern that looks like they're individual boards rather than long strips of timber. And when you're staining it, it seeps into those scribe marks, and it begins to look like actual boards. So the way it works out with the 1x8s that I've used, it's actually it's exactly 8 boards across. It's about 37 scale feet wide, and it looks pretty much like a timber walkway. And here we see the walkway inserted into the bridge structure. It hasn't yet been glued down. That's why you see a bit of a curve to it. But once it's glued in, it'll flatten out. Here's another look at the signals. And you'll see that they come pre-wired with resistors. But if you want to extend the wires, obviously you have to take the resistors off the wires. It's not too difficult. It's just a matter of sliding back the black tubing and then applying a touch of heat with your soldering iron, and they'll just drop right off. Now here's a look at one signal mast that's had its wires extended. There you go, reusing the tubing over the solder joint, and you can make these wires as long as you want. I've made mine fairly long. Not sure yet where they're going to be controlled from, so there's probably a good 5 feet of tangled wire that I will have to carefully straighten out when it gets installed. Now, if we go back to the photo, we can see that the masts are indeed extended from the top level to the bottom level. And you can just make out the cables running along the top and then down to the bungalow. Well, to do that here, this has to be attached to the top, and you can see why then we need to extend the mast to the bottom. That's where our tubing comes in, and the wires will have to be painted black and twisted tight so it doesn't look too large running along the top cord. So with the bit of brass tubing used to extend the mast from the top to the bottom, the only thing left to do then is to extend the ladder. And since we have extra parts in the kit, luckily, we can use the ladders provided to extend the ladder all the way down to the bottom level. Okay, well, here is the almost finished signal bridge. A few things to point out. The planking that I showed you before was a little bit flimsy, so I laminated it to a thin piece of styrene, black styrene. It gives it a thicker look, and it also is much more stable. You can see that everything's been given a coat of Flocal Old Silver just to make it blend in. Everything, of course, except the face of the signals themselves. Those are left black, and it gives it a consistent look. Okay, here we can see the extensions to the mast. It was done with that brass tubing here and here. And you can also see the extensions to the ladders. And that's done by taking that piece of ladder that came with the kit and trimming away half the thickness so that it mates up with the ladder that came with the signal bridge. Now each of the signals has a red wire and a green wire, so there's 4 wires coming through the mast here and 4 wires coming through this mast here. The wires are tucked underneath here, so they're not really visible when it's standing up, and they run down another piece of brass tubing that I've painted silver, and it's tucked just inside the vertical member of the bridge, so it's really camouflaged in a way. and I drilled through holes in the footings or the wires on each side, and they go into the layout and will eventually run to a control system that will govern the reds and the greens that will be displayed on the signals. Now the common wires, the black wires, you can see them here and here, they're going to run down outside and down to a bungalow that will be placed about here. And this simulates what you see in the photo. You can barely see them, but the wires are actually run on the top member of the bridge and then down loosely to the bungalow here. Now, one of the drawbacks of the very short wires that come with the signals is that you have to create a solder joint, a seam between the very short wires and the long extension wires that I made for the red, green, and the black wires. Unfortunately, there's no readily available heat shrink tubing for 30 gauge wire. The little black wrapping that you saw in the earlier parts of this video that came with the signal masts, I think are as small as you can get, and they loosely move back and forth over the joints. The problem with that was that the joints end up being in the middle of the brass tubing that run down the edge of the bridge, and being inside a metal tube and having 4 joints inside the metal tube, obviously there was a risk of short-circuiting. So I need to find some way of insulating those joints without heat shrink tubing. And what I found was this product here, which is a connector coating. It basically seals, insulates, and protects. It's a liquid black goop that you can put on as many times as you want to make as thick a layer as you'd like, and it performs the same function of heat shrink tubing, and it doesn't add too much thickness, so I was able to fit carefully all the joints through the middle of the tubes. Here we have a view from trackside, so you see, I guess, an engineer's view approaching the signals. I'm hoping the lights will be bright enough so that it'll be visible for operators as well. Here's a close-up view from the top looking down from the front, and going around to the back side. That wood grain really stands out nicely. And lastly, here is our little signal bungalow. This is a Details West metal kit. It had an awful lot of flashing in all the parts, so it needed to be sanded down, but it's a very soft metal and not really difficult. I glued it together with ACC, slapped on a coat of old silver, drilled a very small hole in one side, and piped the wires through to a hole in the layout, and those wires will join up with the other ones from the signals to complete the circuit. And here we have an overall view of the finished scene. I'll have to add a little access roadway to the bungalow from the street crossing in the distance, and that will be it. And of course this whole process will have to be repeated on the other side of the interlocking, and here's the bridge partway constructed, no signals attached yet. Unfortunately, this one, since it faces the rear wall of the layout, I won't have to go to the trouble of wiring it up to display lights, because it's pretty much impossible to see the aspects from the aisle of the layout. So that'll make for a quicker installation in part 2 of this video series.